Welcome to Your City Connections, where you get to meet entertaining and informative guests. Guests such as an artist with a brush or with a camera, and guest with a violin. City Connections, providing insightful interviews with favorite son Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb. To city commissioners, the mayor. Interviews with a rodeo queen, to beauty queen, and even a NBA player. Now, join Steve Kime as he discusses another engaging topic on City Connections.
Hello again and welcome to City Connections. I'm Steve Kime. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate the opportunity to come in your home each week. And once again, without fail, we have the opportunity to bring you a very special guest. My special guest today is Senator James Inhofe, and let me just share just a little bit about the senator. You may know everything about him, and then there's maybe a few things you don't. And before we get into the real questions, here's a little bit about his background. Was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and he moved with his family to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think many of us here in Oklahoma associate Senator Inhofe with Tulsa, and for someone who lived in Tulsa for the longest time, at least I do. Member of the class of 1953 at Tulsa Central, and he served in the Army, United States Army from 57 to 58, and he's a Golden Hurricane because he graduated from the University of University of Tulsa, in 1973. And many of you are probably familiar with his political background, but Senator Inhofe worked as a businessman for over 30 years before becoming or being involved in the political realm. And again, he's a U.S. Army veteran. He's chairman of U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, the ranking member, senior member of the United States Senate Armed Services Committee. And we'll talk a little bit about his role in these today. And I'm well aware that he's an avid pilot, goes everywhere, flies everywhere, I should say. And in 2013, the National Journal magazine ranked Senator Inhofe among the top 5 most conservative members of the Senate. I guess that's a good thing?
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. And then more importantly, Senator Inhofe has been married to his wife, Kay, 55 years?
Almost 57 years.
57, I was somewhat close. 20, with the kids and grandkids, it's close to 20, I think. But anyway, Senator Inhofe, thank you for being here today. Welcome to Enid, Oklahoma.
Good to be with you, Steve. And I've seen a lot of you recently. You interviewed me out at the airport, and also when we dedicated the tower.
That's right.
The out at Vance.
And what was that tower's name, by the way?
It's the Inhofe Tower.
Yeah,
it is.
That's
hey, this sounds a little arrogant to say this, but I deserve that. That was heavy lifting getting that tower done in the Obama administration, because he likes to enhance things in New York and places where states other than Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, you can be arrogant. I mean, this is the greatest country we live in, so you can do what you want, right? Well, we just welcome you to the Enid Television Network studio, and we're just honored to have you here today, and we appreciate your time because I know you are one busy dude. Well, right off the bat, Senator, what's the best thing about your role as Senator representing Oklahoma?
Well, you know, it's I often call it you mentioned in the introduction that I was a builder and developer for 20 years or so, and all those years, the biggest problem I had was, and I was doing what people are supposed to be doing. I was making money, losing money, expanding the tax base and all that.
Raising a family.
And yet the biggest problem I had was always the federal government. Primarily the EPA. Now the poetic justice is I now chair the committee that has the jurisdiction over the very bureaucracy that tried to put me out of business for 20 years. Yeah. So it's refreshing to be able to go around the state and talk to real people. And as you know, I've enjoyed doing that now for 22 years. And people wonder why when I come back, usually around midnight on Thursday when we're in session, and I get in one of my planes and go around the state, I really do it for my benefit more than anything else, because, you know, if you hang around Washington, there are no normal people in Washington. But I can come to Enid and I can go to around the state and talk to people about the real serious problems they have, particularly the agricultural community. And we'll be talking about that.
And Senator, that leads in just great segue into my next question. When I was doing some research for this interview with the senator, I ran across this particular statement, and it said that Senator Inhofe had spoken to the Oklahoma Farm Bureau group last year, and you had said, Oklahoma farmers and ranchers are some of my favorite people. They have strong values, and they know what makes America great. So knowing that, does that provide the incentive and the commitment that you take to Washington to serve us?
See, you got to keep in mind, Steve, I spent 8 years in the House, only in the district that didn't have any rural area in it. It was primarily Tulsa. And during that time, you would think, why would I be concerned with the Farm Bureau? I have always been, even during that time, I had nothing to do with agriculture because it was all a metropolitan area. But they are the ones who are sincere, they're conservative, they're pro-life, and all of the issues that I really care about, they're leaders in it. Now, it's even greater now because I can work with them on the issues that really mean a lot to them in terms of problems that they have. Let me just give you an example. I talked about the overregulation that's taking place right now in the United States, primarily the EPA. And if you were talking to Tom Buchanan, the head of the Oklahoma Farm Bureau, he would tell you the number one problem that we're having right now is the overregulation by the EPA. We're talking about now the farmers in Oklahoma. And he says, in specifically, the WOTUS bill, that's the Waters of the United States. If Obama has his way, which he's not going to have his way now because we stopped it, they would have the federal government would have control over all the water that is now controlled by the state government. We don't want that to happen. So we're able to get in there and specifically deal with these issues that the farmers really, really care about. And their issues are my issues. You know, the overregulation, that's something nobody talks about. But, well, I guess Trump's talking about it now because, you know, he's going through a lot of problems with the overregulation in the private sector.
My special guest today on City Connection, Senator James Inhofe, and I'm sure most of you are just really familiar with his role in Washington and how he represents the state of Oklahoma, his district, if you will. But there's something that I found out about the senator that was just kind of eye-opening to me. And Senator deals with adoptions as a strong supporter of adoption. And I don't think too many people are well-versed or know a lot about this, but why are you such a strong advocate for adoption?
Steve, I have to tell you, I didn't used to be.
Okay.
And I've had people are not aware of this, but I've had a kind of a mission in Africa for 20 years or so, over 20 years. And it's more of a Jesus thing, but I also do all the military stuff that the Senate Armed Services Committee does in the continent of Africa. But in that continent, in Ethiopia, we found a little girl that had been, that was later up for adoption. She was actually abandoned at one time. And my daughter, as you mentioned, we have 20 kids and grandkids. My daughter, Molly, had nothing but boys. And so this little girl, we found her when she was 2 days old. And we kind of helped her get nursed back to health and all that. Then my daughter adopted her. And then I got to thinking, throughout Africa, there are a lot of countries that don't allow adoption or didn't allow adoption until the genocide of 1994. Now that changed things because these kids, a lot of them would die if they don't get adopted. The village is not able to absorb all these people. So I've helped a lot of families adopt, primarily out of Africa, but other countries too. And, you know, just look at it. There are hundreds of thousands of young families in America that want to adopt, and they can't get through the red tape. They can't get through the payoffs. They can't get through the objections that they get from different countries. And so that's one of the missions that I have that I've worked with. And that little girl, by the way, is now my adopted granddaughter, and she was actually the outstanding student of the year in her junior high school, in the whole school. And there's a little girl that probably wouldn't have lived.
Sure.
You know.
Well, that's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that. I'm not very close to the adoption process, but I've heard that exactly from individuals who've been trying to adopt, that if you can put up with the challenges and all the hoops you have to jump through, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, and people know the experience that we had, and so we get a lot of people calling our office to help them get around some of the bureaucracy.
Now, educate me, Senator. Let's talk a little bit about Washington, D.C. here for just a moment in your role up there. Tell me the difference between senior member, and I'm embarrassed to say this, and ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
No, yeah, that's.
Are they one of the same?
No one ever asked that question, and they should ask that question.
Because I don't know.
If we are, as the Republicans are right now, we are the majority party in the United States Senate, okay? So that if you have been there longer than anyone else on the Armed Services Committee, then you are the chairman of that committee. Now, when we're not a majority and the Democrats are a majority, then that chairman is no longer the chairman because the chairman is a Democrat.
Correct.
He becomes the ranking member.
I see.
Now, the reason I was the ranking member when the Democrats were in control prior to this last January is because I had the only one who's been there longer than it was John McCain, but he had already used up his 6 years. There's a 6-year limit on that. Now the other thing is we're a majority, so I would become I would become the chairman of the committee after his 6 years would be up of the Armed Services Committee. That's the difference. But no one ever asked that question.
Well, I'm glad I did. I'm more enlightened right now. So, well, thank you for joining us on City Connections today. As you can see, my very special guest, Senator James Inhofe. We're going to talk about his ability to fly around the state and really around the globe, if you will. Talk a little bit more about his role in Washington and what his office can do for us. And we're going to do that right after this break, so stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to City Connections. I'm Steve Kime, and thank you for joining with us and staying with us today. Our special guest, Senator James Inhofe. I was introduced to the Senator, I've lost tracks, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was at the Thomas Stafford Museum, where you should go, in Weatherford, Oklahoma. It is a well-kept secret, and Thomas Stafford's done a great job in preserving a lot of space program memorabilia. It's a great place to go. But I was there speaking at a leadership conference, and I had a gentleman come in during my presentation, and he kept making this motion to say, Senator Inhofe is here. And I was trying to figure out what? So? I mean, he's not supposed to be here, kind of deal. And what we were trying to do was take advantage of the senator to be in this leadership conference and just speak for 10 minutes. And how he was able to get to Weatherford, that he had been flying across the state, meeting with individuals. And so flying is your background, and it allows you to get to the Weatherfords and the Enids and just really around the state to visit with everyone. But you did something pretty incredible. You kind of followed in Wiley Post's footsteps. Tell us about your global
flight around the world.
Your global jaunt there, Senator.
Yeah, it's one of these things where you look back and you think that could be arguably the greatest experience of a lifetime, but it's something you don't want to do again. And particularly in the old plane that I used was a pretty beat-up plane. But no, that was back. We were kind of celebrating the 60th anniversary of his flight around the world. And so we do. And I do fly around the state. I often, it's kind of hard to explain this, but I like to get out of Washington. And when we're in session, I come back, usually on the late flight on Thursday. Then I spend all day Friday getting one of my planes and fly around the state. And I do it really for my benefit as much as for the benefit of others, because, you know, you talk to real people. There are no normal people in Washington. Everyone in Washington is either a staffer or a member or a lobbyist. And so I get around the state and I talk to real people and find out what were the problems. Now, let me give you an example. I remember in Shattuck, Oklahoma, we're talking about, you know, what is the major concern there. And there's a farmer that was there in tears. He's saying, you know, I'm going to lose our farm after all these years because of the fact that the taxes they hit you with when we've already paid taxes on that money. Right. And so one of their big issues, of course, is to do away with inheritance tax. And that is a very evil tax. It's already been taxed. And these are things you discover by going out and just talking to real people. So that's why I'm hanging around you see me around the airport quite a bit.
And the ability that you've got thousands of hours, you're a certified flight instructor, and you are able to fly around. I guess that just really helps you make the most of your time, because you have this limited time maybe a 3-day weekend or something to visit with everyone before you go back to maybe a vote or something. So undoubtedly, it helps you covers that territory.
Tuesday of this week was a good example because the KC-46 is the replacement for the KC-135, a refueling plane that has been used. They do the training in Altus Air Force Base. And we're celebrating the fact that after 60 years of using the KC-135, we're going to get a new refueler. And of course, they give me some credit for that. And so I was able to get in the plane and go down there for that celebration yesterday morning, and then get back in the plane and go to Lawton, to Fort Sill, and to take care of things that are going on. So it's a way of getting around the state, and it's worked well for me.
It's worked well. Well, let's talk about your role a little bit more in D.C. As chairman of the Senate Environment of Public Works Committee, and I hope I have that title right, correct me if I'm wrong, can you kind of share with us one or two accomplishments that folks watching today that they can relate to and say, oh,
well,
okay.
See, that committee, Steve, and people don't understand, it has the largest jurisdiction of any committee in the United States Senate because it's Environment and Public Works. So on the Public Works part, all the road bills, all the highways, all the buildings, all the public works come through the committee that I chair. But probably more important than that is all of the regulators. In the EPA, I mentioned that when I was in the private sector that they were harassing me all the time, and we cannot be competitive globally and take the harassment that we're getting from the EPA. So yeah, I would say we had the FAST Act that we passed this last year. That was a highway bill, and certainly you're aware of it in northwestern Oklahoma, that we have a lot of needs, highway needs. We had the chemical bill, which is one that is a huge bill for manufacturers, a major legislation. Then if you talk to your farmers, they'll tell you that the major thing that they appreciate coming out of this committee is stopping the EPA from harassing them. Now, we were able to stop this. I know there are a lot of people watching out there, particularly since you have a lot of university students that are be watching and all that. A lot of liberals are out there, and they don't like me, and I understand that. And but at least they know where I am on these issues. And when the president has tried to do this thing with global warming, everyone understands, and there are not the votes in Congress. Even the Democrats the majority won't vote for it, because it would be the largest tax increase in the history of America, and it would be doing something that is not going to have the effect of cutting the emissions that there's a concern about. So we now have, in fact, we have now stopped him from being able to do that. You know, he made the commitment at the big treaty that took place, supposedly big treaty in Paris, and yet he made commitments that we're going to do things in this country that we are not going to do. And it would be very costly to people. Well, in our committee, we were able to stop that from taking place. And then finally, the courts came in and agreed with us. So we did that. On the water regulation that the farmers are so concerned about, the Obama administration wanted to change that from a state jurisdiction to a federal jurisdiction, and we stopped that from taking place. So we can name a lot of things that have cranked out of that committee that have been helpful to the people of America.
Well, Senator, your responses are just so helpful to me in my interview because you just mentioned water, and that helps us segue into my next question. Last week, the residents of Enid went to the polls, and they voted to extend this tax, quarter of a cent tax that was in place, because water is a huge issue in northwest Oklahoma, really all across the state of Oklahoma. But they voted in favor to find a way to pay for a pipeline from Call Lake, Ponca City, over here to Enid. And as you know, when I lived in Tulsa, it seemed like it rained all the time, and I knew why they called it green country, because it rained all the time. And then when I get to west of I-35, I'm thinking, it doesn't seem to rain over here.
That's a problem. It's not a problem in eastern Oklahoma.
It's not a problem over there. And when you talk about the fact that we rely solely on water wells, people in Oklahoma City and Tulsa say, wells? What do you mean you don't have a you don't have a 10 killer, you don't have a Grand Lake, you don't have things of that nature. This is a long way to this question. They voted in favor to fund this pipeline to get water from Call Lake over to Enid. Do you feel there's any role federal government has in helping us do this particular project?
Well, yeah, the problem with Call Lake right now, the aquifer doesn't have the capacity it's going to have. I'll bet you even you, in all your wisdom, Steve, may not know that Oklahoma has more miles from freshwater shoreline than any of the 50 states. Did you know that?
No.
It's because ours are man-made lakes, and so you have a dam here, and you have all these miles going. But they're all located in eastern Oklahoma.
Right.
So it is a problem in western Oklahoma. I have sent a letter to the EPA, and I probably should have brought that along. It calls the Enhanced Aquifer Recharge, trying to channel the rainwater down into the aquifer so it'll have more capacity at Call Lake to take care of the needs in Enid and Ponca City and other areas. And that's a technology that is developing right now, so there's a little bit of hope there.
Yeah.
But when you ask the question, does the federal government have a role? Yeah, that would be a role. That would be the federal government.
And we're finding in our, like one of our Ames fields, just 42 miles out of town, we have a pipeline 42 miles bringing water from the wells to the bathtub here in Enid, Oklahoma. But we found out that years ago, the pipe would only had to go down 18 feet. Well, now it's down to 28 feet trying to get that water. So those aquifers, at least in western Oklahoma, with the fact that it doesn't rain as often, is a real challenge.
Well, a recharge system might work, and I'm offering that out for the future.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Well, let's talk a little bit about our veterans here on City Connections. My dad served in the Navy during World War II, and along with all of my uncles. And my uncle that lives in Del City, he's 96, 97. Anyway, he was on one of the honor flights from Oklahoma City to come to D.C. and to see all the monuments and things of this nature. My question to you, Senator, you served in the Army. You're a veteran. You've served our country in that role. Is there anything that you feel like we can do to take care of our veterans better?
Well, first of all, the honor flights. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I don't think most people are aware. I can't tell you how many we've had, but I haven't missed one of them, because I'll go out when they come in from the Atlanta Andrews, or sometimes at the airport at Reagan, and when they come in buses. This is taking World War II veterans who have never seen the memorial, the Veterans Memorial in Washington, and I'll tell you, it's just. There are a lot of tears that are flowing, and they look and they read the names that are there and the loved ones that they lost. And it's such a great program to give honor to primarily World War II veterans, but also it's available to other veterans too. So it's a great program. Yeah, we've had problems. If you might remember how shocked I was and most Oklahomans were, I guess last December, when you picked up the USA Today and they had an article about the bad treatment that veterans in Oklahoma are getting. And so we got on this thing right away. It's primarily in Muskogee and in Oklahoma City. But we have since that time, and James Langford and I have introduced legislation that has actually passed that is giving additional jurisdiction to some of the people that go out into the areas from the Veterans Administration, so that if they find someone who's not doing a job there, they can fire them on the spot. But they couldn't do that before. And so it was kind of a retirement home for people who were not efficient. And we're changing all of that now. So I think you're going to hear from the veterans who are getting better treatment in the state of Oklahoma now than they were before.
Well, we certainly have a lot of veterans here in Enid, and I remember meeting a group of veterans, World War II veterans, that left here to go to Oklahoma City on one of those honor flights. And so, I'm one of those flag-waving Americans. I've got a flag at my home, and it's always out. And when it gets tattered, I get a new one. And I just have the mindset that there's always things that we can do for our veterans.
You ought to, Steve, what you ought to do is get one of the veterans that has gone to this program, have them on for a segment in your program, just to let people know that the level of appreciation that they have for their ability, for the first time in their lives, most of them, for the first time ever, to see the memorials that are given to them in Washington.
Well, I've had them on, but that is a great suggestion, because I've never asked them about the honor flight. So, well, again, thank you for staying with us on City Connections. We'll have more with my special guest, Senator James Inhofe, right after this. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to City Connections. Again, appreciate you taking time to visit with us today or to watch our visit with our special guest, Senator James Inhofe. Senator, a few weeks ago, or maybe the time goes so quick, it may be a couple of months, but we visited when we were out at Vance Air Force Base, and there was a special dedication that took place, and it involved the Inhofe Air Traffic Control Tower. And then you made a comment earlier, said, well, you need to take some credit for that. But just tell us about the sense of pride to know that this air traffic control tower at Vance Air Force Base has your name on it.
Well, it's significant for a different reason than our viewers are probably aware, and that is that this administration under Obama is going to go down as the most anti-defense administration perhaps in history. And so most of the things that we try to do to help Oklahoma, he wants to channel to places like New York and places where he has a base and where he's catering to. I mean, you know, he's kind of given up on a lot of these red states. So that was a real job getting that done. And so we have done, I think, a good job. We have 5 major military installations in the state of Oklahoma. One happens to be here in Enid. And so I have a commitment at least every 6 weeks to be by to see what the military construction problems are and what they're trying to do. Right now, Vance has done such a great job. They have gone through all of the BRAC rounds. The BRAC stands for Base Realignment and Closure Commission. We've had 5 of them since 1987, and we've benefited here. And it's not because of political pressure, it's because of community support. What you guys do for Vance, in terms of educating kids, in terms of roads to get in there,
sure,
and participating. Look what you did out at Woodring, so that they can now use their T-38, they can use their training aircraft out there while they're in improving a runway at Vance. So you do things, and you deserve the good treatment that you're getting. And so it's a great benefit economically to this northwestern Oklahoma, but it also is very significant in terms of the contribution you're making. One of the biggest problems we have right now in the military, this comes, I can speak with authority with this, and that is the pilot shortage that we have now. We have a serious pilot shortage because the airlines, since they have to retire them at 65, they're grabbing up as many of the military trained pilots as possible. In order to train a pilot, starting at Vance and going all the way through training, through, let's say, to get for an F-22 pilot, it costs $9 million, and yet the modest amount of money they can get for flight pay doesn't compete very well with that. So our big problem right now is to see what we can do to enhance the future of military pilots so that we don't have to start training them for the airlines again. That all starts right here at Vance Air Force Base.
And I appreciate you sharing all of those comments, because here in Enid, we hear about the extension out of Woodring, but we try to figure out how that fits into the puzzle, and we understand about the control tower, we understand about the runway replacement at Vance, but sometimes we don't know how it all fits into that puzzle.
Sure.
And it's good to know. Senator, your staff works behind the scenes, and just for our visit today, I've had numerous visits with your local staff and also the individuals in Washington, D.C. Now, I know if I come to Washington, D.C., I can let your office know, and they may be able to help me out on a tour. Or if my daughter wants to go to the Naval Academy, maybe you can write a letter of recommendation. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I'm leading to this question. What are some things that your office can do for us that we may not know about?
Well, let me go back to your academy question, because we end up with more appointments to academies, I think, than anyone else does, because we don't use it as a result of political influence. I know members of the Senate and members of the House that will find the son or daughter of some big financial contributor to them and will give them an appointment, because they can do that. But I don't do that. I have a panel of people who are older people, who are retired, who went through the academies and had a military background, and they do an evaluation. First of all, a student has to have a history of being a straight-A student. They have to show leadership as a president of the class or something like that. And then they have to have a love for the military, where we have a good reason to believe they'll want to be career people. Now, once we get people like that, we help them around, and we have a great record. So I only throw that out because a lot of people don't know the process you go through. Call our office. We're the ones that can help do that. But when you have a visit to Washington, let us know. Because a lot of times, if you're going to get a White House tour or something like that, you have to set it up in advance. If you want to get into a lot of the areas, and we can have people, well, let me just give you an example. Wendy Price is on my staff. She's been there forever. She's from Enid, Oklahoma. She does all my scheduling in Washington. You call Wendy Price, and she will make your trip worthwhile, and will tell you in detail what types of things you can do while you're there to enhance the value of your trip.
I think, Senator, we'll put Wendy's name and her phone number on the screen while we're talking. But that's good to know, and thank you for sharing that information. Senator, one of my final questions has to deal with just stuff that we see on the news way too often with the recent terror attacks at home and also abroad. I think sometimes we sit around the dinner table and we just kind of wonder how safe we are. And this is kind of an open-ended question to you, but for the folks here in Enid and northwestern Oklahoma, how are we doing on protecting the folks here?
Terrible. We are facing the greatest threat we've ever faced in the history of this country, and I'm including World War II. I'm including I look back wistfully at the Cold War when we had two superpowers, USSR and us. We knew what they had. They knew what we had. Mutual assured destruction meant something. It doesn't mean anything anymore. You have a guy who's mentally deranged running the country of North Korea right now. He's developing a capability of firing a weapon at the United States of America, and actually with a delivery system. We don't know how far along he is, but I can assure you he's within a 2-year period of being able to accomplish that. And what North Korea has, Yemen, they trade with Yemen, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and all the other countries. So you have these crazy people who hate Americans, and we have a president who has done a terrible job. I mean, for him to insult, it's the first time we've had a president since 1948, when Israel got their independence, have a president who has been trashing Israel. And this is something that has been, that I look at, and I've got 20 kids and grandkids that I think about. They are in the most endangered position that we've ever been. I know it sounds hysterical to say that, but somebody's got to tell the truth about what's happening. And it's not. To have the president, well, I'll give you one example. In the Ukraine, Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, was so proud because they went through their last election for their parliament. And for the first time in 96 years, they don't have one communist in their parliament. They did it because they love us. Then, of course, Putin went in and started killing them all. And what did our president do? He wouldn't allow us to send weapons in to defend him. Now we had to do that to override his veto and do it through the Armed Services Committee. But we're in a position right now, I hate to say, that our friends don't respect us and our enemies don't fear us. You can draw a line in the sand in Syria and then walk past it and not look back. So we've got a serious problem. We're going to have to correct that problem. Hopefully this general election coming up is going to help do that.
Well, Senator, that is kind of the last of my official questions for you. We're just thrilled that you're able to take time to visit us here at the Enid studio today. But I want to give you this opportunity because I know you're very busy and you've got several stops today and interviews to do and luncheons to go to and so forth. Is there anything that we've have not touched on, and you have this opportunity to speak to the folks here in Northwest Oklahoma? And I want to give you that opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that. And we've touched on most of the things in the way of overregulation that is going in. A lot of this, I'm very critical of the Obama administration. When I see that, and I have to say this, if you elect Clinton, you're going to get Obama for another 4 years because she is right with him. The Benghazi thing, I can speak personally on that because Stevens, the ambassador who was killed, was a friend of mine. He was begging for reinforcements, and for political reasons, he didn't get the reinforcements. 4 brave Americans died as a result of that. So I think if I could single out one thing, Steve, it'd be I want everyone to really look at this election that's coming up, because we've got a future that is going to be dependent upon our ability to have a president running this show and running it right. Now, Trump was not my choice. My choice, actually, it was Rubio to start with. But Trump, at least the guy is smart. He's listening now to the right kind of people. So I put a plug in that. I don't want to have to serve with Hillary Clinton, or I would say vicariously serving with Obama for another 4 years.
Well, Senator, thank you for your time today, and I'm sure you have all types of memorabilia from Enid, but I have a coin that we give to special dignitaries.
All right.
You may have 3 of those or 4 of those, I don't know, but
Don't have one with the wheat on it there.
There you go.
That's good.
And then, listen, I know you have a plane, but I think this is a T-38, but you're the first individual that I presented a jet to, but really that's a flash drive. If you pull the cockpit apart, that's there you go.
Oh,
There's
I
a
see.
flash drive. So anyway, we had those made a year or so ago, and we have a lot of friends at Vance that enjoy those. And I thought, I need to give the senator a plane, give him a jet.
This is going. I know just which of my grandkids are going to end up with this.
Okay. Well, hide it from them if you can, or whatever. Senator, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. It's a real treat. And as you know where our studio is. And when you come through to visit folks at Vance, if you want to take time to stop here at Enid Television Network, please do.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. And thank you for joining us on City Connections. I hope you enjoyed our program. And tell folks about it, that you saw the interview with Senator Inhofe on the Enid Television Network. And again, it'll air on Channel 11 and Channel 12, 111 and 112 in high definition. So anyway, that's it for City Connections. I'm Steve Kime. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, make it a great day.